Yes, you in the hoodie. This isn't some remedial program. If you're lost, the arts building is across campus. The room went still. Heads turned, eyes widened. The voice belonged to Dr. Richard Albright, renowned economist and chair of the Ivy League University's Business Policy Department, the kind of man whose tie alone whispered old money. Cordell didn't flinch. He was used to this. The stares, the assumptions, the way his dark skin and loose sweatshirt made people think he had taken a wrong turn, rather than earned his place. His eyes met the professor's and held them, calm, steady. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," Cordell replied, setting his notebook on the desk in the front row. A few students exchanged uncomfortable glances. No one said anything. The professor blinked once, twice, then gave a curt nod and turned back to the whiteboard. But everyone knew the moment had left a mark. Cordell was no stranger to silence after injustice. He'd learned early that standing up without exploding was a power too many underestimated. When class ended, the students filed out with the usual murmur of confusion and caffeine withdrawal. Cordell stayed behind, reviewing the lecture notes he'd taken meticulously, despite the chill of judgment that had settled over the room. "Interesting tactic," came a voice behind him. It was Professor Albright again, standing with his arms crossed. "Front row. Most freshmen stay back." Cordell looked up slowly. "I like to see the board clearly." "Sure, just don't distract the class with attitude." Cordell packed his things wordlessly, his jaw tight. He could already feel the stories forming around him, the arrogant kid with a chip on his shoulder, the one who didn't know his place. What they didn't know was who he was. Cordell Broadus had grown up in the surreal overlap between fame and reality. His father, Calvin Broadus, the world knew him as Snoop Dogg, had raised him with a steady hand and a grounded heart. No entourages, no special treatment. "Earn it," his father always said, "even if they think you don't belong." So Cordell did. Straight A's. Debate team captain. Internships at firms where he was the only one in the room who looked like him. He wanted this MBA. Wanted to prove that excellence wasn't limited to a zip code or a legacy surname. But here, in this ivy-covered cathedral of status, the ghosts of entitlement whispered louder than any lecture, and some professors, like Albright, listened a little too closely. Later that night, Cordell sat in his tiny off-campus apartment, thumbing through old photos on his phone. Him and his dad courtside at a Lakers game. Him and his mom laughing on the Venice boardwalk. A life far from humble, yes, but filled with moments that had taught him humility. Balance. A message pinged. "Kayla. Yo, heard what happened in Albright's class. You good?" Cordell. "Yeah, just the usual intro." Kayla. "Don't let them box you in, see? They don't even know what room they just walked into." Cordell smiled at that. Kayla always knew how to put it. No, they didn't know, not yet, but they would. If this story's got you hooked, go ahead and hit that subscribe and drop a comment telling us what you would have done in Cordell's place. The graduate student lounge smelled of burnt espresso and mid-tier cologne. Cordell walked in, laptop under his arm, earbuds in, and eyes focused. It was his usual shield. Don't engage too much. Don't give them reason to categorize you. But today, the whispers didn't wait. "Is that the guy from Albright's class?" "Yeah, the one he called out. Bold move, sitting in the front." "I heard he didn't even flinch." Cordell kept walking. He wasn't about to let whispers distract him, not after last night's call with his dad. "Pops, I knew it would be like this," he'd said, frustration crackling through the line. "I know, son," Snoop had replied, voice calm but firm. "You ain't there to be liked. You there to build. You carry in our name, not for fame, but for foundation." Now, as he sat down at the far table, Cordell pulled up his class reading on macroeconomic inequality. Ironic, he thought, to be reading about systemic bias in the same institution that couldn't see past his hoodie. Across the room, Kayla spotted him and made her way over. She was one of the few who didn't walk on eggshells around him. Born in Atlanta, brilliant with numbers and sharp with her tongue, she was the kind of person who refused to shrink. "Mind if I crash your table?" she asked. Cordell looked up. "You're already halfway in the chair, so..." She grinned and dropped her notebook beside his. You know Albright's been like that for years, right? He plays gatekeeper. Thinks if he pushes hard enough, the unfit ones will drop out. Yeah, Cordell said, flipping a page. And somehow the unfit ones always seem to look like me. Kayla exhaled. Yup. They sat in silence for a moment, each pretending to read, neither really absorbing a word. Finally, Cordell spoke. I've thought about walking away, you know, transferring somewhere less hostile. Kayla looked at him, eyes serious now. And let them win? Nah. If you go, someone like me has to push twice as hard. You're here now. Might as well rattle the walls while you're at it. Cordell nodded slowly. Her words sat heavy on his chest, but not in a bad way. They rooted him, gave him a reason bigger than himself to stay. The next day, Albright posted grades for the first quiz. Cordell had crushed it, 98%. No curve, no favoritism, just merit. As he walked into the classroom, Albright glanced at him and paused. There was something in his eyes now, not respect, not yet, but recognition, like he'd realized this kid wasn't going to fold. You again, Albright said flatly. Cordell smiled. Still not lost. A few students chuckled quietly. Albright didn't. Then let's hope your academic performance matches your confidence, the professor said. It already has, Cordell replied, taking his usual seat in the front row. Albright didn't respond. He simply turned and began the lecture. But Cordell noticed a shift. The professor's words weren't just floating through the room anymore. They were trying to land with him. As if Albright had started to realize Cordell wasn't just some fluke who got through admissions by mistake. No, Cordell Broadus was exactly where he was meant to be. The invitation arrived in his inbox with a digital thud. Future leaders of finance, closed-door networking mixer, RSVP required. Cordell stared at the screen. The invite wasn't sent to the entire class, just a few names chosen discreetly. He had a feeling Albright's hand was involved, the same hand that had tried to push him out. But his name was there. Someone, somewhere, had pulled him in. That night he swapped his usual hoodie for a navy blazer. Simple, clean. He knew the rules, blend just enough to not give them an excuse, but not so much that you disappear. The mixer was held in an off-campus townhouse, all glass walls and soft jazz. Men in tailored suits, women in silk blouses, soft murmurs of legacy and leverage floated like perfume in the air. Cordell walked in and felt it immediately, the pause, the polite confusion, the "you don't look like you're supposed to be here" energy. A man with salt and pepper hair approached, smile tight. You're with catering? Cordell blinked. No. I'm with Harvard Business. The man's smile barely twitched. Apologies, you're Cordell Broadus, he said clearly. The man nodded slowly, scanning him again. Interesting. You don't sound like a Broadus. Cordell knew exactly what he meant, but he smiled anyway. That's probably because you've never heard one speak intelligently. Before the man could respond, another voice cut in. Cordell, glad you made it. It was Professor Langston, the only black tenured faculty member in the department. Sharp, meticulous, and always composed, like a storm that never had to raise its voice. Come meet the panelists, Langston said, resting a firm hand on Cordell's shoulder. As they walked away, Langston leaned in. You handled that well. Don't let the microaggressions wear you down. They're sharp, but they're lazy. Cordell exhaled. You think I belong here? Langston looked him dead in the eye. The question is, do you? Cordell nodded slowly. I do. Then act like it, Langston said. And next time someone asks who you are, don't hesitate. Make sure they remember. By the end of the night, Cordell had held his own in conversations about inflation modeling, venture capital cycles, and risk-adjusted returns. Some still looked at him sideways, but a few, including a young associate from Goldman, seemed genuinely intrigued. As he grabbed his coat to leave, Albright appeared at the door. Impressive tonight, he said. Didn't expect you to engage so fluently. Why wouldn't I? Cordell asked, his tone neutral. Albright hesitated. Let's just say the odds aren't usually in your favor. Cordell tilted his head. Maybe the odds were never the problem. Maybe it's the way people like you read them. A beat of silence. Then Cordell turned and walked out into the Boston air, sharp and alive with possibility. Back at his apartment, Cordell called his dad. "How'd it go?" Snoop asked, voice low and mellow. Cordell sat on the edge of his bed. "I think I made them think twice." Snoop laughed. "Good. Let 'em. But remember, this ain't about them. It's about what you do when the room does open. What you say, how you lead." Cordell looked at his reflection in the window. Sharp lines, tired eyes, but steady. "I'm ready for that," he said. And for the first time in weeks he believed it. The semester wore on, and with every quiz, group project and presentation, Cordell carved out a space of his own. The whispers had quieted, replaced by reluctant respect, or at least strategic neutrality. Even Albright had eased off, though his comments remained clipped and formal. But it all changed the day Professor Nguyen accidentally let something slip. Cordell was in the front again, leading his section's presentation on fiscal policy in emerging markets. He had just wrapped his segment with confident precision, citing data with the kind of clarity that silenced even the most skeptical peers. As the group took their seats and the class applauded lightly, Professor Nguyen nodded. "Excellent job, Mr. Broadus. And I must say, your delivery, I imagine it runs in the family." The class went quiet. A few students glanced at each other. One girl even tilted her head, curious. Nguyen blinked as if realizing too late what he'd said. Cordell's stomach tightened, but he smiled faintly. "Not sure what you mean, Professor." Nguyen hesitated. "I thought I'd read something. Never mind. Great work." But it was too late. The curiosity was out in the open now. An hour later, Cordell was walking through the courtyard when Miles, a second-year student known more for his connections than his intellect, caught up to him. "Yo, Broadus," he said, grinning. "Any relation to, you know, drop it like it's hot." Cordell didn't stop walking. "Why?" Miles chuckled. "Come on, man. You look like him. And now that Professor Nguyen slipped up, you gotta tell us. You're his son, right?" Cordell finally turned, his voice even. "What difference does it make?" Miles shrugged. "I mean, none. So maybe all the difference, depending who you ask." Cordell looked at him, then past him, as if considering a path not yet taken. "Tell you what," Cordell said. "If you're more interested in who my father is than how I did on today's econ analysis, maybe you're in the wrong program." He walked off, not waiting for a reply. Back at his apartment, Cordell paced. He had never made a secret of who his dad was, but he also never led with it. That was the line, not denial, not fame, just space, a chance to stand on his own feet. But now the line was starting to blur. Fast. His phone buzzed again. "Kayla. Kayla. Nguyen blew your cover, huh?" Cordell. "Guess it was only a matter of time." Kayla. "You okay with it?" Cordell didn't respond right away. Then Cordell. "I just wanted them to see me first, Kayla. They still do. They just see more now. And if they don't respect it, screw 'em." He exhaled. That night he opened his laptop and began outlining a new op-ed he'd been toying with for weeks. Title, Legacy, Access, and What They Still Don't See. It wasn't about his dad. It was about merit, perception, and the weight of always having to be twice as prepared. He wasn't hiding anymore. But he still wasn't anyone's stereotype. The next morning, Cordell walked into Albright's class and felt the shift. Heads turned faster. Whispers felt louder. Albright didn't say a word about it. He didn't have to. Cordell took his seat in the front, same as always, and waited. There was still one chapter left in this story, and it belonged to him. The capstone presentation was scheduled for Friday. Every student in Albright's seminar would present their research and their ability to synthesize, argue, and lead. The panel included Albright himself, 2 visiting industry leaders, and Professor Langston. Cordell had been preparing for weeks. When his name was called, the room tensed. Everyone knew. The rumors were no longer rumors. His last name meant something now, not because of him, but because of who his father was. He stepped forward. No blazer, no tie, just a black sweater, jeans, and calm. The title on the first slide read, Unseen Variables, Bias in Business Education and the Cost of Assumption. Cordell began. When I entered this program, I was told directly and indirectly that I didn't belong. Not by grades, not by performance, but by posture, voice, and clothing. He paused. No one moved. Everything in business comes down to data, except people. And when institutions misread people, they fail just like bad math. The difference people remember. Cordell clicked through stats. Bias in hiring, disparities in promotion, demographics in MBA programs across the US. It was airtight, controlled, but not cold. He told stories, short ones, real ones, not about himself, about others. Names changed, experiences shared. But here's the twist, he said nearing the end. Many of you found out this week who my father is. That suddenly made me more interesting to some of you, maybe even more credible. So here's the truth. Yes, Snoop Dogg is my father. There was a collective breath, but Cordell wasn't done. I grew up with access, yes, but not entitlement. He made sure of that. I was taught to earn my place, not expect one. And yet when I got here, even earning wasn't enough for some. Cordell turned to Albright. I sat in the front row. You questioned if I belonged. I got a 98%. You said nothing. I spoke at a networking event. You called it fluent, like it was surprising. And all this time I kept my head down. But I realize now, silence is a kind of permission. Cordell scanned the room. I'm done being silent, and I hope the next student who walks through these doors looking like me doesn't have to work twice as hard to be seen as equal. He clicked to the final slide. It was just 2 words, see better. Then he stepped back. The silence hung for a beat. Then Langston led the applause. The industry guests followed. Even a few students who had never spoken to Cordell before clapped slowly, then steadily. The moment built, not dramatic, but real. Albright didn't clap, but he nodded. Once. Afterward, as students filtered out, Cordell stayed behind. He gathered his notes, tucked them neatly into his folder. You surprised me, Albright said quietly. Cordell looked at him. Why? Because I didn't come here to be quiet. Albright exhaled. No, because you didn't use your father's name until it meant something beyond reputation. Cordell paused, then said, That's the only way it ever should. He turned and left the room. Kayla was waiting for him outside. You did it, she said, bumping his shoulder. Cordell nodded. No, we did. Cordell Broadus graduated with honors. That capstone speech became required viewing in the department a year later. He never apologized for who he was, and he never let it be the only thing people saw. If Cordell's story moved you, subscribe to the channel and click the video on screen. It was picked just for you, and you're going to love where it goes next.